She had to step away for a minute, but we'll be back very shortly.
So everything is going, recording, the streams are going, so whenever.
Well, Mike, maybe we could proceed with the oath of office.
So those have already been administered,
Okay.
and we're just waiting for a certified copy of the vote results in order to file them at the county. And that's something that we'll have to get from the school district since we didn't actually administer the vote. So
Okay.
I think on the organizational meeting, the attestation and statement regarding the conflict of interest has been sent to you all in the mail. And we've decided to defer the items 3 and 4 until after our new business. So I think probably the first thing that that needs attention is the election of officers.
Do we need Manita? I would like Manita to be here. All right, well, I think we've got to proceed. Under our bylaws, the trustees elect a president, a vice president, a secretary, and a finance officer. We elect these officers among ourselves. I think the first office we should fill is the office of the president. If there's any nominations for that, I'll take them now.
And Frank, if we are, do you want us, even if we're hoping you are president again, should we nominate you?
Yes.
Okay, so I nominate Frank Brady as president.
All right, is there anybody else, any other nominations?
No, but if there has to be a second, I'll second that.
I second it too. Sorry, I just got back.
Oh, good.
Back.
Okay. There being no other nominations for president, Frank Brady has been nominated for president. All approve, say aye.
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 Any disapprove? Okay, Frank Brady is going to be the president. I like referring to myself in the third person.
Cake from Frank.
Okay, the next office is the office of the vice president. Does anybody have any nominations? I have a nomination.
I nominate Katie.
I second that nomination. Any other nominations? All in favor of Katie Capelli as vice president, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Next on the list is the office of secretary. Does anybody have a nomination? I have a special nomination. I nominate Janet Linder.
I second the nomination.
All in favor of Janet Linder as secretary, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Janet Linder is the secretary. And last, finance officer. Does anybody have a nomination for the finance officer? I do. I nominate Manita Sangvi as the finance officer.
I second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Manita is the finance officer for the coming year. Okay, great. I think that takes care of the organizational meeting things for now. So we're going to call the meeting, the regular meeting, to order. And the first item is the approval of the June meeting minutes.
I move to approve the June meeting minutes.
I just had one, it was just a typo under new business on the second page, the very last line. Frank Brady, seconded by Kathy Capelli, approve the, I think it should be commendation of Steve Schenken's service to the library. Other than that, does anybody have any other comments? Then I second Katie's motion. We approve the June minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay. Approval of expenditures. Approval of the June prepaid checks as reflected in the agenda, totaling $566.35, and approval of the July warrants as reflected in the agenda, totaling $207,463.10. Do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the June prepaid checks and the approval of July warrants.
I second that.
Frank, I had a question. This is,
Is that Terry?
yeah, it's Terry.
Okay.
The agenda and the heading on the report suggests that there are 3 checks, 3 prepaid checks, but only 2 are listed. It says 67991 to 67993, and the actual checks shown begin with 67992.
Hold on. 67991. That's right. Is Eric here?
Yeah, no, that's a typo on the report. Eric is here. We'll correct the report so that it actually reflects the.
So the correct is just 67992.
It's just
It's a typo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Okay.
Nice
Got
catch.
it. Thanks.
Yeah, good catch.
Okay, with that typo, with that correction, do we approve the June prepaids and the July warrants as moved? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Okay, that passes. The financial reports. The June prepaid checks, and the July warrant summary sheets, which we just covered. There's the budget report and the income report. Does anybody have any comments or questions about either? So the budget report is up to June.
June 30.
It's not. Does it go to the higher end of the fiscal year? Is it up? So it's up to June 20th.
Pardon me?
Does it end on June 30th or June 20th?
June 30th.
Okay.
So we're at 80. Sorry, let me get to this page.
I'm sorry, what are you, tell me what you're seeing, Frank, you know?
Okay, so on the budget report, it says July 2019 to June 20, I see, I'm just misreading this because of the,
Right.
June 2020, right,
Right.
right.
okay.
So we're at about 84%, is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
So we will have some sort of a saving, right?
That is absolutely correct. Yeah. You know, so a lot of that is, you'll see in next month's meeting, a lot of the July payments were deferred from items that were from materials that were not shipped and so not paid for until this fiscal year. And because we've been operating in such unusual circumstances, that, you know, we're under a lot on salaries and other operating expenditures. So we did close out the year in a pretty good financial position.
So we, so some of those savings may get spent earlier in this
Exactly.
fiscal year.
Yes.
But we also spend some on capital projects that we were not expecting, right?
We did, and we also didn't. So we did have some unexpected repair and maintenance costs, but we also had some deferred capital expenditures that we weren't able to complete during this year.
Right, so
some of the capital project will also carry over into the current.
So I mean, technically saving, but we're just carrying it over, basically.
That's correct.
So, all right.
And one thing that you'll notice, and Rick mentioned it in his report, which you'll see later, that in the miscellaneous income for June is that $19,000, which includes $19,000 insurance check for the flooring replacement project, which actually hasn't happened yet. The way that was insured was for replacement cost. And so based on the insurance adjuster's estimation, they've prepaid that cost.
And I guess more might be coming.
A bit more.
Okay, and then I noticed that we got a couple of gifts, $50 gifts
Memorial gifts, right?
in memory of Jack Hunter.
Correct.
That's nice.
Sorry to keep scrolling through this. I'm trying to get here.
Okay, if nobody else has any, does anybody have any questions about the income report? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the financial reports?
I move to approve the financial reports.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries.
Was that Janet and Terry? Is that,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
We move on to Ike's report.
Or yours if you have one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do. Well, very short. First, I'd like to welcome our new board members, you know, Heather and Terry. I'm so pleased that you guys are helping to expand our board. And the other part of my report is I'm devising projects for us to do. Going to create some committees, and before I do them, I'd like to do them we don't meet in August. There's 3 committees I'm thinking of establishing, and I would like input from the board members about them. But the first committee would be a planning committee, and it would have 2 or 3 members, and its members would liaise with Ike concerning the strategic plan and any other long-term planning projects that the library might be engaged in. The second committee is a personnel committee. This would liaison with Ike, maybe Tara, when it comes to designing and implementing employee evaluations. They would also coordinate the director's evaluation, and they would also liaise with Ike when it comes to hires of the higher level staff at the library. That would be, I think, a 2 or 3 member committee, probably 2. Third would be a recruitment or nominating committee. Right now, Manita and I are that committee. We may just end up being the same, but I'd like to make it a standing committee. I think 2 would be enough for that. But I would like to create these committees in September, and I would really appreciate any input any of the members, the trustees would have. Please reach out to me if you have any thoughts about this, so we can get kind of moving forward. It's really Janet Linder's idea to expand the board so we can have more committees and do a better job for the public. The last thing I guess I would mention is Manita and I are very hopeful that we will have a 7th trustee by September, and so we're still very hopeful that's going to happen. And then I will send around a resume, and hopefully we will be appointing someone at that time.
Frank, do you want to just explain, like, if you appoint someone, what happens to that person, just for the new members?
Oh yeah, thanks, Janet. Yeah, so yeah, for the new members, if the library appoints somebody to fulfill a vacancy, if the board appoints somebody, then that person serves out can only serve up until the next election. They would have to. So whoever gets appointed in September, hopefully, they would have. If they wanted to stay on the board, they'd have to run for office in April and get elected again. But that's as long as that appointment would last until the next election. So is that anything else you want to add to that, Janet?
No, I think just that it's really a short-term appointment, but it gives us that 7th.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I have. Is there any public comment? Ike, do we know? Don?
At this time, there's no comments on the Facebook page.
Thanks.
But if you want to wait for 30 seconds more, then they'll hear you ask for a comment and we can see.
Okay. Why don't we do that? Why don't we wait?
Okay. It shows there is 6 people watching, which may be all of us watching it. I don't know. You asked on Facebook and there's nothing yet. I can't see that people are typing though, so I'm not sure if anything comes up, I can pipe up.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Don.
Yep.
Mr. Pulver, do we have any correspondence and communication?
We do not.
Then we were finally up to the director's report.
And I'm assuming that you had a chance to read it, and I didn't know if there were any questions, but to hit the highlights, I wanted to also welcome Heather and Terry. congratulations on your election. And for the budget vote and trustee election, it really was an unusual circumstance for us this year. And what we are uncertain of is whether this is what this looks like in the future. If voting by mail becomes universal, we don't know exactly yet. So when we get to the schedule for the year, you'll notice that I did put on the schedule a date for our hearing and for the for the budget vote and election that follows our historical pattern of having the budget vote in the library on the Thursday of National Library Week. But I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions and discussion about whether that is actually what we do as we go forward. If this year's experience with voting by mail, becomes a permanent situation. I couldn't say, but it seems like there has been some discussion around that and what that would look like in the future. I couldn't say.
Well, it would certainly increase the turnout.
It sure did. It sure did.
Oh, that is a good thing.
So libraries restarting. I wanted to let you know that we still are relatively in line with our largest peers in our two library systems, those being the Crandall and Clifton Park Half Moon and Schenectady, Maine, in terms of where we are in our reopening phases. Clifton Park might be a step ahead of us. They're in a phase now where they're doing curbside delivery by appointment. They are also allowing people into the building in a limited fashion to do a little bit of browsing, but primarily to come pick up items that they have on hold and check them out without an appointment. That's very likely the next phase for us, but the timing of it, a lot of it will depend on the replacement of our floor area. In the past, in the first 2 weeks of doing it, the last 2 weeks of June, we did, we had some growing pains, but at least on the backside, and like I said, on the front side, it was smooth sailing. We had about 600 appointments during that 2 week period. We started out with 2 people every 15 minutes, discovered that we could, from the public service facing side of things, that we could actually accommodate more people, although we were very close to at our capacity in terms of what we could do on the back end of placing the holds, making appointments, checking things out. That seems to have, we've streamlined that a little bit. Things have slowed down a little bit. And we have some new tools at our disposal that Brendan Kozlowski, our web developer, has developed a method for our borrowers to make their own appointments rather than relying on 100% on library staff to call people back when they want to make their appointments to pick things up. But all in all, I think staff have performed amazingly admirably and have been really adept at dealing with the pretty constant changes that we've dealt with for the last few months. So I wanted to thank everybody who's had a role in getting us back into getting physical materials into the hands of our borrowers.
So how do you feel then after the flooring is finished? Do you think it's going to take time to move on to another phase, or?
I think it will. I think we still want to be gradual and deliberate about how much access we give people to the building. But I think, once the floor is replaced and we can get to a point where we don't necessarily need to have appointments for people to come into the building, and people can come to our circulation desk rather than circulation staff doing all of the the behind the scenes work to get things ready for people to get. Right now, we've got this grab and go situation where everything is done in advance for people checked out. They come in, grab their stuff and head out. And I think if they could come to a service point where we didn't have to do all of that pre-work, to just come and pick up their holds and transact in real time, I think that would very likely allow us to serve even more people.
And that's what Clifton Park's been able to kind of move to that.
They have, yes.
Yeah.
They also had a pretty aggressive plan in terms of when they would be allowing people greater access to their building, but they're putting the brakes on that. They're slowing things down, partially because, you know, seeing what's happening across the rest of the country. You know, we don't want to get ourselves into a situation where we open too quickly and then have to cut back. And so we wanted, so the safety of both visitors and library workers is really paramount to us. So doing as much as we can to serve the public in the safest way possible is really what we're aiming to do.
Like what is the basis? What is the basis for determining when to move from one phase to the other? Are there particular metrics that are being used, or is it consultation with other libraries, or what? How is it determined?
It has been up until this point in consultation with other libraries and watching very closely what the state is doing in terms of its phased reopening, I think, and keeping a very close eye on the data that's coming out of the state health department and the county department of public health in terms of infection rates. And really, we're following the lead. We're consulting with our cohort of libraries, but also following the leads very closely of health officials. So we don't have particular metrics that we're aiming for, but we're watching to see what the guidance from the state and the county are.
We have a reopening plan, Terry.
Yeah, I understand what the phases are. I didn't know what determines how the library moves from one phase to the next.
It's really just keeping a close eye on what's happening health-wise and what the guidance is from the state and the county and from the CDC. And honestly, a big part of it is also what the comfort level of both the staff and our customers are. So what we found initially is that once we started coming back into the building, allowing people into the building to get their things, we had a real rush, an onslaught of interest. Like I say, those 600 appointments in the first 2 weeks of providing the service. What we're finding now is that things are slowing down a little bit, and we don't know whether that's because we've caught up. We sense some of that, or because like us, the community is also being cautious in terms of being too, we have heard from people that they're still nervous to be in the community too much. And so we're trying to take that pulse as well as the pulse internally of our staff.
I also have some concerns, though, Ike, that I don't know that, especially families with young children and things, though, doing holds is so much harder. I mean, Laura may be able to speak on that of, you know, how do you pick online 10 or 15 different picture, how do you kind of make that happen? So as much as we're concerned of what's going to happen with the state, I also have fears that we're in a good spot right now and we could end up go backwards, and then we haven't let people get any of those services and we're extending that period of time a very long time. Right. So I don't know if there's creative ways that people are coming up with of then when we move into that, maybe it isn't whole families that can come in, or, you know, how do we do that more quickly that those numbers don't catch up and we end up behind?
So part of the planning for the next phase will be or part of the service for the next phase will be a little bit of a browsing service. So rather than having to go online and place all of these holds, we can bundle things together. So here's a bundle of picture books on a particular theme. So you come in and grab those. And so it does allow for a little bit of browsing, but not for complete access to the whole collection. And then at that point, we might, because I think you're exactly right, that people might not even be aware of what's available to be put on hold. And so we've got librarians both in our adult and youth services department who are providing readers advisory service. So if people call up and say, I don't know exactly what I want, but this is what I like, we also have a form that people can fill out to get kind of a bespoke service. So we'll gather things together on a theme or a subject or that match your what you've told us are your tastes in terms of things that you might want to take home. So that is a service that we're providing now, but the next phase would allow for a little bit of browsing activity.
I do want to second Katie's point though, because as a parent to a young child, we found it very difficult because we don't know what he's going to like. And so having him sort of browse, talk to us, it's a collaborative decision-making process, and it's hard to do that. And especially if, there's the second phase that's coming, if we never open up, like Katie said, that could be an issue that we're closed for a long time. Katie, you're muted still.
Sorry. Is it possible to rely some on the van or something? Also, I mean, I'm also thinking about just people who we've spent all this time talking, don't necessarily have phone service reliably, don't have the people I was hearing about with the appointments. It was tricky. They were only given particular days or particular times. So all of those outreach possibilities, is there either that we can create some space outside that people could do something, or could we use the van and be someplace with, is there some other ways we could start to imagine this?
I think you make a very good point. So one thing that we have been talking about, but it relied on donations, so we put the brakes on it a little bit, is a partnership with EOC, which does delivery of food and essentials to households throughout the county, partnering with them to actually, and possibly with the Friends of the Library, to have a collection of books to give to people so that they could have books in their homes. And these are young families, so to give to families within the service area, and possibly use the van to help EOC deliver their goods as well as the library materials. So that is one thing that we're looking at, and there may be other opportunities like that. We did. It doesn't have to do with children, but we did also hear from some of the institutions that we visit for homebound and outreach services, that they are now once again ready to take deliveries of materials. They are not yet welcoming visitors, but we can drop things off for residents at some of these places, which is another opportunity to use the van.
Sorry. Is the funding of that something that you need us to help work on, Ike, or
The funding of
some of those, providing some of those services to the community?
I think we're actually in a good place. And when we were talking with EOC, the idea was to do maybe a book drive for gently or like new children's books, and maybe supplement that with resources from the Friends, from donations that they have in their shop, particularly when they're not able to operate, and then be able to get books into the houses of these families.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ike, I don't know if these use statistics have any value. Do they?
They don't have a ton, but I did want to point out a few things for you. I mean, you'll see, as you might expect, that the use of our digital materials is really increasing sort of exponentially here. The other thing I did want to point out to you that that might be unusual is that, or you might have questions about, is what you see down here in outreach, where we say that we have made 36 outreach visits. It's hard to know how to account for them, but what that is that Janine Jeter, who does our outreach for us, has been making wellness calls to some of her clients, and so these 36 are 36 people that Janine called to check on their well-being. And
That's
then
nice. That's nice to hear that's going on.
yeah, and then the other thing is that volunteer hours, of course, for the things that generally happen in the building, there are no volunteer hours, but we do have quite a significant number of volunteer hours for adult literacy. And those are people who are using one of our dedicated Zoom accounts to do one-on-one English language tutoring and adult basic education tutoring. So that is still happening virtually.
Excellent. That's excellent.
And then this report from Agorapulse is very long, but I did want to share a couple things from it with you to show you, particularly when we're posting on the Facebook page, what's resonating with people. So the top content in June is people are very interested in the services that we're providing. How they can get those services, especially the contact list. And they're also, they're very happy to see library workers. So I can't tell you how many of our customers I've come across in the parking lot, sitting in their cars, crying emotionally about having had the opportunity to come into the building to borrow things. Happened to me today, as a matter of fact. And then beyond that, it really is about reopening, and then our statement, our response about about anti-racism was one of the top things that resonated with me. So I don't know if there were questions or comments about any of that.
It's some of this I admittedly don't quite get, like a brand awareness score.
This is a brand new tool for us. We trialed it for a little while and have decided to subscribe for a year to see how useful it will be to us. It is really helping Gina Michelin, who's our community relations coordinator, manage the social media, and that's really what it is. It's a social media manager.
Interesting. There's, it says who the average fan is,
Right, and which on Facebook is no surprise to us that it's a woman in her 30s to 40s.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that? About the Facebook report?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to move to the department report. Could you explain to me what the Folding at Home project is?
Sure, it is a citizen science project, and I don't know, Don, if you're still here, maybe you want to talk about it.
Yep, I'm here. It is a grid computing. I think that's the term. It's actually fairly old. They started it a long time ago with SETI at Home. People may have heard of that, but they utilize computers at people's homes, or actually in our case in a business, and probably other business as well. The cycles of the computer where they're not in use, they use those cycles to crunch numbers for different projects. For SETI at Home, it was analyzing radio waves, but for this project, Folding at Home, it's doing the numbers for genetic computations, trying to find, in this case, they were doing a lot of work for the COVID to try to find cures for that.
So essentially, while our computers were sitting idle while we were closed, we actually dedicated the computing, the processing power to participating in this project to help find a solution to our current pandemic.
That's fascinating. That's very interesting. Okay, is there anything else about administrative services that we should be aware of?
No, I don't think so.
You want to go to circulation and technical services? Ms. Ferris here?
I am here. How are you?
How are you?
I'm well.
How's it going?
It's going well. I wanted to.
Everything working smoothly?
Everything is working smoothly. I would say week 3, we've got it down, and we're still refining a little bit, but staff is very busy checking in and checking out. We finally have some checkouts again on our chart, but nothing significant. We've been checking out materials so that our patrons can grab and go the day of their pickup. And we have still about 18,000 items still out there in the world. So, things are coming back, but they're not coming back. I'd say we've had about 8,000 to 10,000 items come back, and we've checked those all in. And so we're still waiting for stuff to trickle in. Our checkout dates for anyone who had anything due during our emergency closure has been pushed another 10 days, I believe, so people can still keep them out for a little while longer. But if anyone's out there listening, both of our drop boxes are open, and we're ready to take your stuff back whenever you're ready to come visit us. And otherwise, does anyone have any questions?
18,000, did you say?
Yeah, there's 18,000 items still out.
Wow.
And Jen, has that been announced on where you've been announcing what the reopening has been? Have you been making it clear to people that they can bring all their items back?
Yeah, and people have. I mean, we've purchased 5 Rubbermaid bins, and we had to start being creative even with our bin taking. They fill up really quickly throughout the day.
Good.
And we're still quarantining everything for 72 hours once it comes back. So there's a delay in checking things in. But yeah, I mean, it's not like people aren't returning stuff. They are. It's just we still have all of that stuff out there, which I think goes back to what Ike was saying earlier, is people are still hesitant to come out to the library.
How are you feeling about the next phase, involving people opening up the desk and people coming in?
I think it will relieve
Clifton Park.
I think it'll relieve some of the back end work. I'd be interested, Clifton Park just started last week. I'd be interested to see, it was slow to begin with, to see how their capacity is with people just walking in. Their setup is designed different than ours. They have one door in and a welcoming station before they even enter this grand foyer. So for us, space designing will be interesting to be creative with, but Ike and I have been walking around trying to figure out how we can have people browse without getting in each other's way and then coming to the checkout station in a safe fashion. So I see it as, yes, the next step. Definitely still thinking about it a lot, and waiting for the floor project to be done, because that definitely gets in the way. We wouldn't want to start something and then the next day say, sorry, you can't come back in. So.
Right. No, that would make no sense. Well, thank you for all your efforts in navigating this.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jen, if you don't have anything you want to highlight, I guess I'm going to move on to Sarah.
Yeah, Laura's here, and I think.
Oh, Laura's here.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Laura, if you're talking, you're muted.
Okay. As of report time, we have 53 children signed up on Beanstack for the summer reading, but we gave out 2 cycles of printing of the bingo cards for the summer reading program. So we won't really know exactly how many we have, because they don't always have to sign up through Beanstack, because some of the people that don't have a computer used to come into the library and use it. In this case, they can't. So it seems to be going pretty well. Sarah and Heather for the children's and Heather for the team, they've made promo videos to send to the different schools on the summer reading. Oh yeah, and the one thing I wanted to point out really that was really neat is that Heather was saying she has a TAG committee, which is a Teen Advisory Committee, TAG. And she said has a really nice group of teens, and it's turning into sort of like a social club, and they talk about some of the things they'd like to do in the library and some of the things when we get back, and some of the things just that they're having trouble with. So it's turning into a nice consult kind of group too. Really pleased with that. We haven't had a TAG group for a couple of years now, so it's really nice to see that starting up again. And I guess that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, adult services. Jen O. Is Jen O here?
Hi, yes, hello. So I don't have a lot either, just staff have been continuing to do different kinds of programs, and you can see the variety, I think, of things that they're offering, from aquatic invaders to American Sign Language to coronavirus job market searching. So, it's been interesting to see, because I feel like we're definitely getting more views on our Facebook page than we are active participation in online programs. But it's interesting to see how many people sign up for the programs that don't come, but then we'll watch the video later if it's a program that we've taped. So that's been nice to see the engagement, at least after the program, and that people are liking the on-demand service. I just wanted to talk briefly about the holds process, as Jen Ferris had alluded to. So adult services staff have been taking the appointments for people to pick up their holds. So patrons are given a number to call, and then they get a live staff person, hopefully, that can make an appointment for them. The first day that we started this, when the holds went live, the first 2 days were completely inundated. It was like you coming into our mailbox could take up to 20 voicemails, and it was full. And Don had extended it to us for 40 voicemails because they were filling up that fast. And so with 2 people trying to answer the phone and return calls, it was quite a backlog. So things have been slowing down a bit, I think, especially since people know what the process is now. We have return customers who will say, oh, have you done this with us before? And they're like, oh yeah, I know the drill. And that makes the process go a little bit more quickly too. And then in addition to that, I think Ike mentioned Jen and Don and Brendan and I have been working on a procedure to do some online appointment scheduling. It's probably not going to be ready to go for patrons to use directly right away, but we are hoping to have staff start using it to book appointments this week. And I think it's going to make the process a lot more smooth. And when we get to the point where patrons can book themselves online, staff will be really comfortable with the process, I hope, and we'll be able to offer a more convenient service to the public as well. So that's about it. I mean, there's summer reading is happening too, and it's a new format this year. There's been a few videos, if you haven't seen them yet, on our YouTube page about some of the scavenger hunts that adult services staff are working on. So check those out if you want something fun to do around town. At least one of them is a walking tour that you can do with your kids or your family, and just ways to stay engaged with the community in whatever way we can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
I don't know if you, Jen, I don't know if you know anything about this West Side Narrative Project. Is that Lori's doing? Is that Lori doing that?
That's Lori, yeah.
That
Yeah,
sounds
I honestly, I don't know a lot more details about it. She's mentioned a bit in her reporting and in her emails to me, but I don't know the full details of it right now.
Sounds fascinating anyway. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we're up to Tara. There.
Hi. Hi there. Hi, Heather and Terry. Welcome. My name is Tara Chabra. I'm the Human Resources Manager. I look forward to working with both of you. My first item is really just one seeking action with the approval of appointment of Marianne Rockwell and Lori Weiss to the positions of Librarian 2.
Okay, this was part of that plan that we went over a couple of months ago, correct, Ike?
Ike is muted.
Ike is muted.
Okay, now I guess I am not. So yes, that is correct, Frank.
Yeah, that's what I have scratched out here. Well, this is a great idea. I'm glad we can upgrade them.
Could you sketch in that plan for newcomers?
Sure. So these are actually existing employees that have been with us for some time in full-time positions of Librarian 1. There are different levels of librarian at our library within the civil service jurisdiction. Librarian 1 being that usually for entry-level librarians or for librarians that have a narrower scope of responsibility. Librarian 2 being the next level up. Oftentimes they come with a certain level of expertise in a certain subject area or have a certain level of responsibility that is a little bit more than a Librarian 1. In the case of these 2 employees, they've been functioning for us as Librarian 1, took the most recent competitive examination for Librarian 2 and scored well enough to be appointed. And we had, in doing an ongoing kind of assessment of positions that we do at the library to make sure that we're being fair and how we are appointing and compensating, mixed with some appeal from the employees themselves about the additional responsibilities that they had come to carry, that they be considered for Librarian 2s instead of Librarian 1. So the Literacy and Assessment Librarian is a newer librarian position to us, with it's maybe 3-4 years old at this point. and has really grown by leaps and bounds under Marianne Rockwell's pretty much solo supervision. So she has compiled a whole program. She is now supervising, I think, upwards of some 20 plus volunteers that are working primarily one-on-one with members of the community. So it really is much more of an enhanced kind of position, more befitting a librarian 2 appointment. Lori Weiss oversees the local history collection, staff, and again, a core of volunteers. Requires a certain level of expertise that librarian 1s don't typically come to us with. Lori has a background and has gotten additional education in archiving and in digital collections management. She too oversees routinely a group of about 10 to 15 volunteers, as well as a part-time library clerk. Librarian 3, the highest level of librarian accepting Ike's position, is what Jennifer Ferris and Jennifer Ogrodowski are currently appointed as. So again, Librarian 2 has some level of supervision, but still reports to a department head who is a Librarian 3. Does that help?
Yep, thank you. I should
You're
just add that I've worked a great deal with Marianne Rockwell in my role with the Saratoga Immigration Coalition and the work that she does with the English language learning programs. And I think she's doing a wonderful job. So, you know, I certainly support her promotion.
Fantastic. Yes, she's doing amazing things with our community for sure.
Yeah, thanks for that, Terry, and for that beautiful explanation, Tara. Thank you.
So again, both women did take and score well enough to be appointed, so we wanted to make their appointment to the Librarian 2 position with civil service, and first wanted the board's okay to do that and to have that be in sync with July 1st. So it would be a little bit retroactive.
So do we need a motion? 'Cause
Yes.
I move that we approve Marianne Rockwell and Lori Weiss to Librarian 2 positions.
I second it.
All in favor? Excuse me?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. They're appointed to Librarian 2. Congratulations to both of them.
Great, thank you. Otherwise, my report was pretty standard and detailed. Were there any questions about it or anything that I wrote about?
I really liked your that you appended all these your human resources questions and answers. That was really interesting. And you're keeping, I guess everyone can go to them as a resource.
Yes, yep. And I know that the trustees have been asking some of these questions in past meetings, so I figured I might as well share it with you as well. So yeah, there's actually a newly created part of our staff site on the human resources page where this lives, along with some other COVID-19 resources that we've been directing staff to, including the different policies that have been recently approved, as well as the forms for if ever anyone needed to request COVID-related leave, and the training resources that were put together to enable staff to come back to work safely and in compliance with our expectations and the guidelines from the state.
It's an excellent idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Tara, if you have nothing else, I'm going to move to Mr. Taras. Rick here?
Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Terrace. Welcome aboard to the newest board members. In the first paragraph of the appointment or report, you'll see about crazy pricing for PPE. I'm seeing Don's piece, but just to let you know, crazy pricing, this month of the beginning of July, gloves alone have more than doubled. And you're going to see a lot more pressure on that pricing. We've been making and utilizing some very good contacts, and they've been taking care of us. Moving down, I had wrote the piece about the parking lot, Copeland Coatings and Sport Surfaces. They recently finished resealing the parking lot, and I can tell you those guys worked super hard in very tough conditions. They actually finished the lot on Friday for sealing it and didn't take a lunch, so we would have enough time to dry, hopefully, before it poured. We had about 2.5 hours, a little more. And the 1.5 hours is the minimum. So they did a great job. And this morning, very early, the line striper showed up. As you know, we had some weather, crazy weather with rain, and they finished line striping the whole lot within about an hour and a half. They really hustled in it. I think did an excellent job. They went above board to make sure everything was right. As for the flooring contract, we're challenged by the scheduling. I was hoping to have a more detailed conversation with the installation scheduler today, but I did not receive a return phone call. I knew they were supposed to have a jobs meeting about where they were, but I didn't receive a return phone call, and I'll be on that again tomorrow morning early. Other than that, I don't know if you have any other questions about the report or where we're headed. I think the staff has been doing an excellent job of working together and getting some projects done. We rehabbed the cafe. There's some minor touch-up stuff left, but I think it was a ton of work, and they really did come together and make that happen in a very reasonably short period of time, considering what work was involved.
Rick, I have a question about
Sure.
the new conversations around the air filtration systems
Sure.
and having more people. So is that something that the library needs to make adjustments to what we have, or would we be able to meet those requirements if the state?
Sorry, I'm cramping up a little.
Okay.
My leg is cramping on this stool. As far as the air filtration goes, we've really always been ahead of it since I came here. You know, we've increased the amount of cleanings and services. We've upgraded the filters, and we're doing more changes. We're spending a fairly expensive amount of money making this happen on, with the more changes. The hard part is if you look at what the governor's been saying about malls and stuff, can you push that some more? You probably can. One of the things that happens is you can reduce some of the life expectancy of the equipment because you're putting a lot more pressure on it. With these hospital grade, we already do the lowest level of hospital grade filters. I had sent out an email, Tara had asked this, and some of the requirements that are being asked of the malls, they're using in environmental labs, in radioactive filtration places. I mean, some of it is just so far the other side of what our equipment can do. Even though it's new, a little bit newer equipment, it's more challenging in this environment. We've increased and upgraded all the other systems to work better together, and we do get quite a bit. We have actually a direct drop fresh air system, so it doesn't mix in with our system. It literally just pushes it into the library. So we get a lot more air changes than many of those facilities. But do we need to do more? I haven't seen that evidence as of yet. And at and at what cost to the taxpayers, for what we're getting for patrons and staff. I think we're in extremely good shape. But, that's something that you can choose to do. How cost effective is it? And what is it really doing? For high use, like in malls, I can see, because you have a lot more quote exposure, the challenge is, are they being forced to upgrade more equipment, that more service, instead of coming in on quarterly, are they doing bi-monthly or monthly? So there's some extremely exorbitant costs, like in filters alone, your cost can jump 150 to 250% on a change. So this is some big dollars. We're not talking. And then you have the order queue to change to between a grade 10 and 12 filter. You can be waiting 3 to 5 months. So because everybody who's high end, like the hospital triage rooms, and they're the priority. So now you're in a very long-term queue. So there's challenges on all ends of the spectrum. I just don't see that technical need at this point, and I do get worried about the equipment. You can order a certain level, but at a certain level, your equipment technically will be challenged to do that.
Has the state given you, the libraries, any guidelines in this area?
None that I'm aware of.
No.
They're all recommendations. You see many recommendations. The hard part is they haven't told you how to fund it or how to do it. So we try to be ahead of the curve in all aspects. And I mean, our guys are doing more work. In fact, we were tuning up a unit this morning because we were having an issue with it. But we're really trying to stay on top of every little thing. So to give you, for instance, it's a little more than one complete filter change for all the units in the whole library. That's the bill for AAF filters was over $1,200 and some dollars. And that wasn't ordering everything, because we do have some leftovers, from the order before. And that's just changing filters.
Rick, could you talk a little bit about so what they're suggesting for malls, or the requirement for malls, where it seems like there's probably less fresh air exchange than we have, is
Correct.
A minimum of a MERV 11 filter. And
Correct. But they were suggesting like
11 to 13, right? So,
or higher. I saw originally it was higher, but then they found out they were very challenged to get something like that. And cost.
Right. And so we have in place here our MERV 8 filters.
8s, correct. At this point, they're MERV 8s. We just had reordered, to replenish some supply for the next change, and, to be prepared, because I really didn't think that we would even get those until the end of August. And I was really surprised that, they came in already. But that's because we're in the MERV 8, they had a little more supply of that, where the higher levels, they're really in short supply, high demand. For a lot of the medical facilities, all of the rehabilitation. I mean, everybody is moving that direction. And I'm not saying we can't move up, but it definitely will get much more expensive. And instead of changing 4 times a year, when you move up to that higher filtration, it also requires you to change more times a year because those smaller holes fill up much quicker.
And is that also, that does that cut the life of the machines? Or does it
Yeah,
affect
it will affect the life of the unit because you start to overpressurize them. It definitely will affect the life of the unit. You know, we're fortunate to have those fresh air. You know, those are heat recovery and energy recovery units, and they require a lot of extra air. And because they're not mixed into our system, they're direct drops, we actually get much more airflow than we would normally get, you know, utilizing an integrated system. Between 20 and 30% minimum more.
Okay, so we're in a good place right now as we stand, but we have
We are.
our ear to the ground to see if things change or we need to change.
Yep. And I'm you know, we all have networks. We talk to people and we're trying to see what we're doing. You know, we're very fortunate to have a much newer infrastructure than some of the other commercial buildings and stuff, and that helps us. And we really look at what's happening with the filters that we have. You know we have a unit that's over on the Hattie's side of the building, and we know that that needs more attention because it draws in more dirt and other material in the air system. So sometimes if it gets close to the change and we see that the unit's starting to give off clues, we'll change that early. But our staff is very attentive, and yes, we'll definitely be watching and inquiring more.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. Did you have anything, Katie?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move over to old business, which is the budget vote and the trustee election.
And I think we've touched on that already.
Right. So it's a lot of votes. I think I got 400. I didn't get in the thousands. Okay. Ike, you have a draft racial and social justice policy. Would you like to speak to that?
Sure, I would. As you will very likely recall, when we were getting ready for our latest round of strategic planning, we were very interested in issues surrounding equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think given the current state of the world and the country and our community, I think looking at that work becomes even more important as we go forward. And so what I've done is draft a policy that responds to what's happening, you know, in the climate, but also, you know, it puts some teeth behind the notion that not only are we going to, you know, navel gaze, we're actually going to do something. And the thing that that we're going to do right off the bat and probably continuously, and I'm sure much more will come out of this as we do our planning, is make sure, is take a good hard look at all of our policies, practices, procedures, programs, et cetera, to make sure that they are, you know, that they're not obstacles to service for people in our community who might otherwise be marginalized or underserved. I think this is going to be hard work, but I think it's going to lead to, if it's approved, and even if it's not, I think we'll be doing a lot of this work in our planning process. So, we're going to, also, puts us in a position where, we have in our policy that we make sure that we engage as many people in the community as possible in planning for everything that we do. So I don't know if there are any questions about that.
So I had asked Ike where we're at with how we are going to begin with the strategic planning piece, partly because it feels like we're in such an unusual and unsettled time. And when I read the policy, I know that right now it's really hard, like for us to endeavor to reach, engage, and include people in some of our decision makings right now about our services. And so, as much as I am supportive of all of the things this is outlining, I feel a little bit of concern about kind of sitting up here in the tower, just deciding we're doing the policy, but we're not actually doing these things right now because we can't figure out how to do them in our current environment. So I don't know if you have a sense of that or an update with them, or how if we pass this as a policy, how we can actually begin this work that we are in fact reaching people.
I think those are all fantastic questions, and I'm not sure that I have answers to all of them, but I think the first thing the first part of what you're asking, I did reach out to the consultants and told them that we would be considering this, that EDI issues are more important to us now than they ever have been, and we want to have a call to them. We're going to schedule a meeting soon to make sure that we can, to strategize, to figure out how we can reach people that we traditionally don't. It's something that we always say that we want to do, and then we're always a little stymied in how to do it. But I think the good news about a lot of this unrest that we're experiencing right now is that I think people who might be underserved or marginalized, et cetera, are speaking up and identifying themselves. And so I think it's going to make maybe that work for us in identifying who we want to have at the table a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's going to make the conversations necessarily any easier, but I think it's certainly going to make the participants easier to identify.
And Heather and Terry, I don't know if Ike, did you share with them details that we had started to try to begin our next strategic planning process?
I hadn't had the opportunity yet.
Okay. We had hired consultants and we're all excited about all these new ways that we were going to begin this work, and had scheduled open meetings and everything. And then the pandemic happened. And at the beginning in March, we said, okay, well, clearly nobody can even think beyond what's happening in this moment in time to even think about the library in a larger framework. And now, obviously, we're still in a similar place, which I don't think any of us expected would be the case. And the particular group we were going to work with works with a lot of libraries around the country. So I think our hope is that maybe now everybody's going to be in a similar position of how do we move forward with our strategic planning in that respect, specifically around these issues. And do we have to, on a separate note, Ike, do we have to then submit something to the state because we had that July date by which we were expected?
No, they've extended, or there's a moratorium on some of these requirements.
Okay.
Because it's not, we're far and away not the only people in this position.
Right.
I would just to make a quick comment, going back to something that Ike reported earlier. Like you were talking about the possibility of a partnership with the OC and outreach, and I think that they would be an excellent partner in helping with this question of engaging underserved communities in general. So it would be great if that partnership could grow and expand.
I agree, and we have done some limited partnering with them over the years. And I know that Terry, you were going to participate in at least one of those
That's right.
groups. And I don't know about
Right.
Heather, if you were on the list for any of those. We had scheduled, I think, at least 12 different focus groups to start gathering input from the community to determine, to prioritize what our service priorities would be as we went forward with the new plan. And my sense is that when I talk with Rob from the consultants, that their business model is going to have to change. You know, when we first started examining what we might have to do, it really was the first week when we closed down that we had all of those things scheduled. And we had some very brief conversations then about whether we wanted to do something in a format like this or virtually, and they were having a hard time imagining what that might look like at that point. But I think now, all these many weeks later, I think we have a pretty good sense that this could be a viable forum for those kinds of discussions. And so I anticipate that at least in the initial stages, before if we're not able to meet in person with all of these groups that we would like to meet, at least we can do something virtually. A difficulty with that is that I would imagine that many of the people that we're hoping to reach are probably the people who are most in need of our services and probably with the least access to technology.
Right. That would be my concern as well. And but who's to say there aren't going to be other ways for us to create outdoor space that can happen? And in which case, is that something we need to think about early in the fall before it's then winter and I don't know, we're all huddled by fires trying to be outdoors and gather input,
Yeah, right.
walking around, meeting with people outside. So, yeah.
Unfortunately, it just sounds like this whole process is going to be delayed as everyone figures out how to, do the strategic plan,
Right.
carry it forward.
Or at least prolonged.
Right. And I guess you say Rob, they still trying to figure out how they're going to move forward, right?
Yes, yeah. But they, of course, they're aware that these are issues that were of concern to us, back at the beginning of the year when we were vetting potential people. And they understand how it becomes even more important to us now.
So your proposed policy is certainly consistent with the concerns that were partially animating the strategic plan. Does anybody else have any thoughts about adopting this as a policy, the racial and social justice policy?
This sounds a little, I mean, it's like almost everybody did this, and I know Ike did this almost like, a month ago, Ike? It's a few weeks ago, right? Like, will it just look weird that we're coming up with it so late in the game? I mean, I'm totally 100% supported, and I've had a conversation with Ike about it, but like, is anybody thinking, wait, maybe this was too late?
Well, we made a statement that wasn't a policy statement shortly after the events in Minnesota. But I think even if it's too late, it can really not ever be too late. I mean, if
no, see, I'm on the same page. Like, I'm on board. The other thing is that it would be great having Heather and Terry here with us. Do we want to include Steve somehow, since he was part of the thing when we sort of talked about this sort of more outside of the board, but he was still a part of it? Just another thought out there.
I'm not sure I understand your meaning. About the planning process, you mean, or about the policy?
No, as in, just to acknowledge Steve as part of, you know what, maybe it's too much. All right, I'll just stop my half-baked idea there.
Well, and I guess my other question, is since we knew, since so much of this is already the policies that exist in the library, is there anything new in the way this particular policy, as you've written it, is providing new or different information from the ways in which we've included it in all the other policies that are just the guidelines of the library?
I think the biggest difference is that it actually commits us to looking at all of our other policies and procedures and putting them through a vetting process to make sure that that there aren't we aren't putting up barriers, whether intentionally or otherwise, to service. And I think that is what's different from this, that it really commits us to taking the good, long, hard look at what our policies and practices are, and then taking action to change them if we identify that they're actually providing barriers to service rather than access.
Okay. And is your inclination then that you would have a committee that's going to go back and relook at every policy, or is it, things moving forward, or how will you actually implement?
I think honestly about that, I don't know, but I think that's part of the work that we'll have to do is to identify how we're going to, the process that we're going to do this. And I am kind of imagining that a lot of this will happen through the planning process that we, that we've already sort of undertaken.
I think, Manita, also it could easily, because it is so connected to what we had already, basically is what we had chosen to be the focus of the strategic plan. It feels completely congruent to have that be, since that's delayed, for us to be being able to make a statement to the community that we live in that this was the work we had hoped to begin, and this is our first steps towards that goal, right? Does everybody agree with that?
I do.
Yeah. And with our new board members.
Right.
I mean, yeah, obviously, the rubber has to hit the road. We have to actually do the work. But as a policy statement, it's a good idea to include it. I just froze up.
You're good. We can.
Am I okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Seem to have frozen. All right.
It's because nothing's happening.
Okay.
Do you want
No, I froze. I was frozen there for a little bit. I really was. All right.
So I would make something happen by moving the adoption of this policy.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of adopting as a library policy the racial and social justice policy, all those in favor, raise your hand. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Ike, your policy is adopted.
Thank you. And so where does that leave us with the agenda?
You have Juneteenth next.
Okay, so this is
Unless you want to talk about the fines now.
the fines, and Juneteenth is part of this if we want to go back to. So, having said that this policy actually requires us to go back and look at our other policies to make sure that they're not actually making barriers. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop sharing that screen while I making barriers to access rather than providing access. For a long time we've been talking about overdue fines, and and the notion behind overdue fines is that they're an incentive for people to bring back borrowed library materials in order to be shared with other people. But there's a greater conversation, and we've been having it here amongst ourselves even is that could that actually be having a deleterious effect on people using the library, particularly if they're concerned about money, and especially if they are people, for whom 20 cents might be a lot, or if you've got a big family of children, that can add up pretty quickly, and so it might be a discouragement to using the library if you're worried that if you've got 5 kids, you bring them to the library, they each take home 5 things, and they're a day late, and suddenly you owe $10 to the library. So
I guess I have a couple of questions.
sure.
What would be the mechanism for, reminding people? And then is there any way to measure success here? And maybe that's related.
So we do have a mechanism for reminding people, which we would still do overdue notices that say that your things, because we do a variety of notices now. We do your stuff is almost due, your stuff is overdue, your stuff is now even more overdue, and your stuff is lost. And so we would still make efforts to retrieve materials, to incentivize people to return materials, but stop, even an overdue fine, it sounds like a punishment rather than an incentive, right? So what we would do is probably shorten the period of time between which something went from overdue to lost status. And when something became lost, people would still get a bill for the replacement cost. So there would still be an incentive for people to return.
Like what are the revenue implications of this? That is, if this policy went into effect, what would be the loss of income to the library?
So this year, it's been diminishing because we've made some changes over the years in our policy. So we've lengthened loan periods, we've reduced fines, and circulation of physical materials is diminishing in favor of circulation of digital materials, which are automatically returned. So we've gone from, in the last 4 or 5 years, budgeting about $90,000 a year in overdue fines, to this year we've budgeted about $40,000 a year in overdue fines. And what we've seen, of course, in the last 3 months is that we're not collecting any of that income, except for the replacement cost of materials that people are sending us from other libraries. So we're not doing it. And so far we haven't noticed really any impact. Of course, we're operating under very strange circumstances, and so we have lower personnel costs, we've had lower materials costs, et cetera. But what we're finding is that even without that income for the past 3 months, it's having no impact at all on our budget.
Other piece of that was that the other libraries around us, I remember we did quite a bit of research into what they were all doing.
Right.
And most of them were giving up fines, or at least a lot of them.
Right. And so what's the landscape now is that in sales, every library in Washington County has eliminated overdue fines. In the region, Albany Public Library, I believe, has eliminated overdue fines. It's not the case with Crandall and Clifton Park Half Moon, which are our nearest peers. But I happen to think that this might be an area in which we could potentially be leaders. There is lots of library literature about the impact of eliminating overdue fines. And what people find more than anything is that more people use the materials, and it really has no effect on getting materials back, which is sort of the opposite of what you might anticipate.
I had a question about specifically when we've discussed this, the books and things was one thing, but the museum passes, I didn't think we had very many museum passes. So that was one question, is if we only have a few and we're not asking for them back, potentially, if we're giving people unlimited amounts of time, are we really then, that seems like a different situation to me. And the same was my question with the Chromebooks. Are those Chromebooks that people are just using in the library, or are they Chromebooks that people are taking home?
So those are Chromebooks that people are using in the library.
Okay.
And we've had this conversation internally too, because when we originally had this conversation, those were the very things: the museum passes, the Chromebooks, and the Wi-Fi hotspots that we thought maybe if we want to maintain something like an extended use fee rather than an overdue fine, we would do it for those items. The things that are, of which there are very few and are relatively high dollar items. But we, and I don't know if either of the gents want to chime in on this, because we had, we did have this very conversation. And where we erred, I don't know if erred, where we landed is that, yes, it is very likely that we would want to put more of our resources into getting more of those rather than having them, rather than maintaining what might be a barrier to people borrowing them, because those are things that the people with the least amount of access to cultural institutions and to technology might very well be more nervous about it, because if they've got a high dollar fine and then a high dollar replacement cost, when that might be something that could really be useful to them, it really could be a barrier to access to those if they're nervous about taking them out.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that it was that those cultural institutions themselves were placing limits on us, that we could only have 2 museum passes from this place or that place. So that was only my concern was, if someone then just chooses kind of not to ever bring it back because there has no replacement value, and they just don't really want to drive downtown to bring it back, then we're really cutting off access to lots of other people.
Right, and they do have a replacement value. I mean, not as an object, but we purchased the membership, and so that would be the replacement cost. It would be the same as if you lost a book and you would get billed for the replacement cost of it.
Otherwise, I'm absolutely supportive of the fines.
I am as well. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I move that we remove the fine and fee schedule with those changes that Ike has indicated about replacement costs.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The proposed schedule of fines or proposed new schedule is adopted.
Thank you. I'm going to try not to get emotional, because I think that is a majorly important thing that you've just done.
That's great. It's such a change from when you think of the library.
All right, I'm going to go try to get back up to the top of this now. And so the other proposal, might require more discussion and might be a little bit more controversial, but in terms of, so actually, one other thing I wanted to point out to you as a change in this schedule of fines and fees, apart from eliminating the overdues, is we did have on the schedule a charge for computer class materials, and those were sort of booklets that Kathy Handy was copying for people who were participating in her classes. And it's the only program-related charge that we have. And again, it's one of those charges, and to be perfectly honest, it wasn't often collected, but it is one of those charges where the programs that people were purchasing them for were also largely workforce development related programs. So it probably makes the least sense to charge for a program where people are developing their job skills. So we've proposed eliminating those.
Yes.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. The next up is a proposal to make June 19th, otherwise known as Juneteenth, a paid holiday.
And that relates to this racial and social justice policy as well. Because, first of all, part of the impetus behind this is that, at least for this year, that through executive order, the governor declared Juneteenth a state holiday for state workers. And the city of Saratoga Springs is working on doing the same for city workers going forward in the next year. How it relates to this policy is that it recognizes an important cultural milestone for members of our community that traditionally hasn't been recognized. And in a meeting the other day, I likened it to, we celebrate Independence Day, and this is a date where the rest of us were granted independence, and I think it deserves as much recognition as our national holiday does.
So I agree with the sentiment behind this wholeheartedly. The Declaration of Independence and actually the Constitution dealing with the 3/5. I mean, this was really completed, or was a major step in moving toward completing that vision of all are created equal. That said, I think we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves here by declaring this a state holiday or our library holiday, a paid library holiday. I think I would rather postpone this proposal until the state has adopted Juneteenth as a state holiday. I know by executive order, the governor did it this June, but there's a wide understanding that there's going to be some legislation proposed to actually make this a state holiday in the coming legislative session. If for some reason it's not adopted by the legislature, if they do, and I think at that time, then we should revisit this and follow suit. But I think we should wait for the state to act first rather than do it ourselves now. So I'd like to postpone this proposal until the state has acted. Does anyone else have any thoughts?
Frank, could you just explain why you would prefer to wait?
Because I think that we're asking the taxpayers. Right now we have 12 or 14 paid holidays.
11.
Or I'm sorry, 11. Virtually every one, excepting I think Christmas Eve, is a state holiday. So we're obviously keeping, consistent with the state in what we declare to be a holiday. If we're gonna tell the taxpayers that we're gonna have another unpaid holiday, which I think we should wait for the state to actually declare it a state holiday, so we're in sync with them. I see no reason to get ahead of ourselves now, and next, the next Juneteenth is not for a year from now, so we have plenty of time to consider this and wait for the state to act. So I totally agree with the sentiment, but I would rather wait and see what happens. Maybe somebody will actually, do something about Columbus Day. I don't know, but I think there's no need to act on it now. I'd rather the state acted first before we told the taxpayers that we were going to have a paid holiday. That's my opinion.
Well, I think in any case, we should plan programming for that day going forward, as we do for MLK Day. And I mean, just to have a major amount of programming, be the community center for programming, if we can do that. But as far as it being a paid holiday, I mean, I think it's going to end up that way, Frank. But I think
so too.
I think that I think all of our other paid holidays are recognized as state holidays. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think with the exception of Christmas Eve. But you're right.
I would be comfortable with deferring action, but I'm a little uncomfortable with simply tying the adoption of the holiday to what the state does. I'm thinking of the policy that we just adopted, which asked us to review all of our policies in the light of our commitment to racial and other kinds of justice. So it would seem to me, I think it's entirely appropriate, since this is a very new proposal, to defer action, but perhaps to make this part of that overall review of our policies, to think about, how do we observe holidays, and how does that relate to our commitment to racial justice? So we're not, in other words, we're not upfront saying we want to tie this to the state holiday, although that's certainly possible.
I think that's an excellent point, Terry. And I think that if the state for some reason doesn't act, I think we should revisit it ourselves, and consider it. I just don't think we should do that right now. We have plenty of time to think about it and see if the state doesn't act first. But I agree we shouldn't tie it to whether the state does it or not necessarily in the end, but we have a lot of time to kind of see what happens.
I support waiting as well. Is there a reason that you feel that given that it's almost a year away, that we would have to make that decision right now?
No. And I think that we might still have some unfinished conversation internally about what we do to recognize it.
Yeah, I don't know whether it isn't a day, I know we use, even though Martin Luther King Day is a federal holiday, we use it as a day of programming to raise awareness. I know there's those who are, like Frank said, Columbus Day. I mean, it seems like it's all shifting of what we recognize or don't recognize. So,
right. And Columbus Day was part of our conversation as well.
But I do like the fact that Terry brought up. I mean, we were talking about not just making a statement, but saying, what are we actually going to do to show that we have that kind of commitment? And we had the exact same conversation on the SALS board. Just, putting out a statement saying we support things isn't enough. And how do you demonstrate that you support it? And Terry, I think you're right. I think this is one of the ways we demonstrate it. So hopefully we'll do that. Maybe we'll table that for now, but I think that looking at it that way, I feel differently about it. Yeah.
I don't know how much the board gets into the technicalities of parliamentary procedure, but I guess what I would like to do is make a motion that we postpone action on this proposal pending the review committed to in the previous policy statement.
Okay, does that need a second, Frank, or?
So your motion is to postpone indefinitely.
Well, pending review, I would not just say indefinitely, but pending the review stipulated in the previous policy. In other words, I'd like to see this linked to the commitment that we just made.
I think also Manita isn't here right now, but she has brought that up in terms of other things at the library, in terms of programming, in terms of, so it does feel as though it should be a part of that larger conversation.
Yeah.
Are you talking about in context of the strategic plan or in the context of reviewing the board's policies?
The racial and social justice policy is my understanding, right, Terry?
Right. That's right. Yeah. The policy we just adopted said that we commit to review of all of our policies. This would be part of that review.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
I
Okay.
agree with that.
All right. So, Janet, you second that then?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. That motion carries.
All right, so do we want to go back to the,
Do we need to then adopt the holiday closing and board meeting schedule?
we do, and I'll update it to remove Juneteenth. I did want to fill you in on a few other things here, and I'll have to double check and make sure all the dates are correct here, but the September board meeting, since I've been here about 12 and a half years, the board has very graciously allowed that meeting to be postponed to the third Monday so that I could, rather than the second Monday, so that I could attend my family reunion in Michigan. But this year, like everything else in the world, that event is canceled. So if you would like to go back to the original date of the 14th that follows our pattern of the second Monday, I didn't know if you wanted to consider that.
That would be better for me.
It'd be easier to remember.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm for that.
And then the other thing that you may want to know, I mean, I started by talking a little bit about the uncertainty of what voting looks like going forward. If it looks more like it in the future, like it did this year, whether we want to just have these dates in April on the calendar in case it doesn't, in case we revert back to what our tradition has been. But I just did want to point out to you that we do have those, the budget hearing and the vote on this calendar, following what our usual calendar is.
I think they should stay on for now. I mean, if you want to put them in italics or something, you do have them bold, but, you know, and we'll know more as we get closer, obviously. But at least we have them in mind going forward that could happen.
Yeah, it would be interesting if they expanded the mail-in voting. And, you know.
I think that's a good thing, but I think we still have to keep, it's nice to have that to focus on for, you know, the people who are running again, or, you know, to just know when that happens. And you're still going to have an annual report and so on around those dates. So it seems like a good thing to leave on the calendar.
Then in 2021, I did schedule the meeting the way it has been for the last 12 or so years on the third Monday, hoping that maybe by this point next year, there might be an opportunity to see family. And then the other thing that's unusual is, I mean, we have done this in the past, that for New Year's Eve of 2021, because it is on a Friday, and given our location, we have done this in the past where we've closed a couple hours early so that we can clear out before the party begins. So we have a 9 to 3 rather than a 9 to 5, which we might do if that holiday fell midweek.
Those all sound fine to me. So are those it, Ike? Can I make a motion that we,
Yep. So we'll strike Juneteenth and then we'll leave the rest here, but I'll go back through the calendar and confirm the dates and make sure that that they all actually line up. I'm pretty sure
And
that
change the September 21st to the 14th.
yes, yep.
okay, I move that we adopt the 2021 calendar with those changes.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, I think that concludes our business. Welcome, Terry and Heather.
Don't we have an action on a commendation?
Oh, we do. I'm sorry. Yes.
For Dan.
Thanks, Terry, for
Oh,
for
wait,
remembering
not in my
that.
pack. Where is it? Where is it?
I move that we approve the commendation for Dan Hubbs, who I bet is really happy he retired.
I know this is normally something we would have done before he departed, but he left in
Right.
such a strange circumstance that, I mean, not the circumstances of his leaving weren't strange, but
Right.
in which they happened were definitely. So
And Jen, I can't even imagine the kinds of questions. Usually we get our list of questions that everyone's being asked from Dan. So there are probably some pretty interesting ones happening right now.
We did have a question about something with regards to dragonflies the other day that I can't quite remember, but it was unusual.
Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed reading it, Ike, and I'm sure he'll be really pleased.
Yeah, I think it's great. So do we have to vote on this?
So I just made a motion for it.
And
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And then I do see that the Friends annual report is on there. Is that really?
right, and that's just by way of information,
Yeah,
so that
okay.
you could see the report. But to let you know that the awards that the Friends give each year, who those recipients are. So there's the Marie Morrison Award, which is more or less a Library Volunteer of the Year award, which this year went to Rose Contadino for doing the graphic design for the van wrap. The H. Dunham Hunt Award, which is sort of the highest honor there is for service to the library, went to Jessica Niles, who was the former president of the Friends, but who was the real driving force behind writing the grant, both that got us the van and that got us some technology equipment. And then the Friends have their own Friends Bookshop Volunteer of the Year award, who was Al Zeiger, who also for years volunteered for the library as well.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Now we can adjourn
Okay.
to September.
Have a good summer.
Oh, hey, if you guys, if you have any thoughts about the committee's thing, please send them my way.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Uh,
Good night, everyone. Thanks.